I hear stories about small businesses and medium-sized businesses not being able to get loans, despite Wall Street being back very profitable. That tells me that people aren't thinking about their obligations, our mutual obligations to each other, the fact that we're in this together.
Barack Obama at a Manhattan fundraiser for the DNC last night with a little tough talk for Wall Street as he collected their campaign cash.
You too could have heard about President Obama talking about how people are getting rich if you could afford $30,000 a couple. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABCNews.com's Top Line. I'm David Chalian.
And I'm Rick Klein.
Each weekday, we're bringing you the very latest political headlines, reporting, insight, analysis, everything you need and want to know about politics.
And your daily pre-lunch supplement can be taken all day long. It's twitter.com/thenote. Let us know what you think.
What is your top line today, sir?
War at home. New poll underscores President Obama's problems with the war in Afghanistan. An astounding 2/3 of respondents say they don't think that President Obama has a clear plan for Afghanistan. And that may be because he actually doesn't have a clear plan for Afghanistan. He's still trying to figure it out. A lot of interesting elements in this, among them that his support among Republicans on the war in Afghanistan appears to have softened significantly. It just tells you how tough this political balancing act is going to be.
Except I think if you're inside the White House reading this, you feel somewhat okay because the likelihood is that he will get the benefit of the doubt from Americans when he does announce the strategy as commander-in-chief. We know his commander-in-chief ratings are high. So if you have half the country, before you even say anything, that when you do make the announcement, perhaps it swings to a 55-45, 60-40 kind of scenario where it gives him a little bit of breathing room. Doctors for sale? Yes. Today there may be a cloture vote on the Senate floor looking at this so-called doc fix. This is the Medicare payments to doctors that senators are trying to deal with outside of health care reform. Democrats, because they have promised to be budget neutral in health care reform, have this $245 billion proposal to fix this for a 10-year period. This is something that senators fix every year, both parties, Democrats and Republicans. Nobody wants doctors to not get their payments and then start telling seniors in their districts that they no longer can see this doctor of their choice. This is a big problem for Democrats, though, because of the health care battle.
It's rare that you see behind the curtains of how Washington works as clearly as you do in this case. The American Medical Association making very clear this is what they want. And, oh, by the way, they may support health care reform if this happens. We can start the clock from after this passes until we see their endorsement at the big press conference. Secretary Kerry, yes, that was John Kerry hovering behind Hamid Karzai yesterday in the announcement that he'll accept a runoff election. We learned new details about the behind-the-scenes diplomacy up to the very last minute. Our John Call reporting that Hamid Karzai was ready to go the other way and say he wasn't going to accept a runoff. And it took the personal cajoling of Senator Kerry talking himself about what it's like to lose a presidential election. Of course, he was passed over for Secretary of State, but he is out there as prominent a diplomat as there is in the Obama administration today.
I love it that John Kerry was talking about how you sort of have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move on after you lose a presidential election. This election was a few weeks ago. I don't recall John Kerry dusting himself off quite as quickly as he needed Hamid Karzai to do. But yeah, he's in the spotlight today. Unbelievable. And finally today, Obama TV. That's what's going to be on television screens in Virginia now that Creed Eads, the Democratic candidate, the struggling Democratic candidate for governor there, has gone up with a new TV ad starring Barack Obama. This is taking Obama from his August visit, I believe it was, in Virginia, at Tyson's Corner there, using that stump speech on television now. Of course, the White House gives its blessing to this kind of thing, or it wouldn't have happened. You have the DNC chairman, Tim Kaine, as the current governor, but Obama now fully owns this Virginia race.
And just yesterday, Creed Eads was at a debate where he said, I don't think the public option is the right idea for Virginia. He'd probably opt out if he had to. So a little local politics.
We're going to begin today up on Capitol Hill. We're joined by a member of the Republican Senate leadership up there, Lamar Alexander, senator from Tennessee. Senator Alexander, thank you for being here, and we are glad to have you on this day where you've just gone to the Senate floor, sir, and started talking about concerns you have about this Obama White House, painting it in sort of Nixonian light, saying that they're creating enemies list and what have you, and that you are concerned that this Obama administration is like Nixon in the way of it's just looking inward and all about sort of self-survival here.
Well, what I said was based upon having served in the Nixon White House as a very young man 40 years ago. I'm seeing the same seeds now that I saw then. And my suggestion, friendly suggestion to the Obama administration is don't create an enemies list. But what we've been seeing is they're going to, quote, neuter the Chamber of Commerce, according to the political newspaper. They're going to boycott a major news network. They're going to take away the antitrust exemption from insurance industry who disagrees with them. They put a gag order on a big healthcare company that let its beneficiaries know that their benefits might be cut. Instead of characterizing those who disagree as enemies, that takes us down a road we've seen before. It's better to work with people with different points of view, and I think the president would be better served by that.
Is it a bit much, though, to make comparisons to Nixon? You're not alleging criminal behavior inside the White House, are you?
Well, eventually that was true, but what I was talking about were the early years of the Nixon administration. It started off innocently enough with Vice President Agnew saying nattering nabobs of negativism, but after a while, here came the Nixon enemies list. My advice is don't create an enemies list.
Senator, when George W. Bush of your party was in the White House, the spokesman would sort of attack the New York Times from the podium for reporting that it did not like. There was an entire issue of the U.S. attorneys scenario where U.S. attorneys were being selected based on politics. That has come out to be exposed. Did you give similar friendly advice to the Bush White House that they were starting to create an enemies list?
I would always give that advice to the White House. You know, going back to Adams and Jefferson, our founders, who used to trade insults before the day of the 24-hour news media.
You weren't around to give them advice, as I recall, though.
I didn't give it to them, but the best advice for the White House is push most things out of the White House, leave the street fighting to the political consultants, focus on a handful of truly presidential issues, and try to work with the other side. That's the advice I'm trying to give.
Senator, you're Newsweek's cover boy this week with an innovative suggestion about making college degrees the standard 3 years instead of 4 years. Explain to that, and I mean, why do you think that what happens now in 4 years, maybe 5 or 6 years, depending on the student, can really be accomplished in 3?
Well, it would save time and money for students, and I made it clear that I didn't think a 3-year degree is for every student any more than a hybrid car is for every driver. But there are a lot of well-prepared students who come into college. They're ready to go on. Instead of running up big student loan debts, they might go to Hartwick College, for example, in New York, which says finish in 3 years and save $43,000, which is the cost of the fourth year.
And what about in sort of secondary and primary education back at home in the States? Would you conceive of maybe seeing a 12-year calendar, a 12-month calendar for school systems instead of this 10-month calendar, no summer break for students? Well, that's a very good question because the high schools are becoming boring for many seniors, and many seniors need more time in high school to prepare for college. And I think if you hooked up the junior and senior high school years with the first year of college more, you could compress that into 1 year. The students would be better students, they'd study more, they'd learn more, and they'd become well prepared for a 3-year degree if that's the route they chose.
Senator, I want to ask you about the doc fix, the thing that's on the Senate floor right now. Obviously, a lot of Republicans are upset about how this is going through. Democrats say, though, this is never supposed to be part of health care reform. Is it intellectually honest to treat this as something separate?
No, it's not. I mean, this is the first vote on health care reform, and here's what the Democrats are doing. They're raising the deficit $1 trillion, $250 billion. A weekend after it's been announced that the deficit for this year is an amount of money that equals the entire national debt for the first 200 years of the Republic. So the first vote is on whether to increase the debt $250 billion. That's what we're voting on. Of course we need to fix physician reimbursements, but that'll be a part of the whole 10-year plan for health care reform that we're debating.
And one other issue I'd like to ask you about, Senator, is the talk of potentially extending unemployment benefits. Obviously, we have not yet pulled out of the deep job trouble that the country is in right now with unemployment at about 9.8% nationally. Is that something you would favor, extending unemployment insurance right now for people?
Yes, I would.
And how would you pay for that?
Well, we'd have to pay for it. We'd have to find ways either to raise taxes or cut out of other programs. For example, one way to do it would be to take the money that's not expended from the stimulus program that was passed last year and spend it instead on unemployment benefits.
But, Senator, that's money you voted against. You didn't want that stimulus bill.
You're exactly right, but the money's obligated to be spent, and rather than spend it on non-stimulative projects, I'd rather spend it on unemployment benefits. We haven't gotten to that yet. We don't have a specific proposal. We don't know what it would cost, but if you're asking, do I think that some increase or some extension of employment benefits is a good idea, the answer is yes.
Senator Lamar Alexander, Republican of Tennessee, thank you, sir, for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for your time.